Killer Innovations Podcast for Sunday, November 13th, 2005. Show number 36. Coming to you from Cupertino, California and Albuquerque, New Mexico. Welcome to the Killer Innovations Podcast. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Before we get started, please keep in mind that the information and opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and mine alone, and do not necessarily reflect those of my past, current, or future employers. Well, I'm in Cupertino this week and then back to Virginia for the weekend, coming up on the Thanksgiving holiday week next week here in the U.S. I actually wrote this show on a flight from Albuquerque, New Mexico back to San Francisco. I was in Albuquerque for the weekend. My son had yet another fencing competition. I got an email from a listener who happened to be in the audience of an appearance I had on Monday in Atlanta, Georgia. I was down there emceeing an event in the TV studios at Georgia Public Broadcasting for the MIT Executive Forum. I was quite surprised that there was a listener in the audience. He didn't come up and identify himself at the event, which I wish he would have, but I realized that this either he had seen some advertisements of the appearance or had found out the information from someplace else. And a number of you have sent me emails about keeping up on where I'm going to be giving public appearances or speeches so that we can get caught up. And I realized that this particular event in Atlanta I had not let you, the listeners, know. So I'm going to try to compile a more complete list of upcoming appearances and get them up on the website so that if you feel inclined, we can meet up at those events. So with that in mind, I will be actually giving a lunchtime keynote this Friday at the Lord Fairfax Community College in Warrenton, Virginia. This is the local community college near my house in Virginia. The appearance is sponsored by the Fauquier, be careful how you say that, Fauquier High Tech Association. So I live in Fauquier County, and this is the local small and medium-sized business high-tech companies that operate in the Northern Virginia area. So it's a small rural county. This is the local community college. There'll be lots of students. I actually got asked to give this speech some months ago, and the topic is on innovation and creativity, and so this is just another way that to kind of pay it forward, get some students excited about looking at innovation and creativity differently. So I'm actually going to see if I can record it. It's a 30-minute speech that I'll be giving on kind of a motivational topic, innovation and creativity. And if I can, then I'll play it in an upcoming podcast. If you are in the Washington, D.C. or East Coast area and you want to come, just drop me an email and I'll give you the specifics. Let's see. Thanks for all the feedback. Still getting lots of emails. You can drop me an email at podcast@killerinnovations.com. You can always call the voicemail feedback line at 703-636-4460. I apologize. I'm getting slower. In fact, I think on responding to the emails. This new job responsibility for my day job is just has me swamped right now because I'm still doing my old job and doing the new job while they hire my replacement in the old position. So, but don't hesitate. Keep the feedback coming. I do read them. I'm probably not as quick in responding as I'd like to, but please keep the feedback coming. Thanks for all the votes. We've received, just for the month of November, we've received more votes for any month than we've had since we started last March. So I want to say thanks for all the votes. You can now subscribe to the Killer Innovations podcast at killerinnovations.com. You can also visit the iTunes music store and search under podcast. We're also listed under Yahoo and Podcast Pickle and all the podcast directories, so feel free. There's a lot of activity going on at the KI community site. Again, I've not been able to participate as much as I would like as far as participating in the conversation stream, but I think it's actually excellent that the listeners have stepped in and are having some good conversations amongst all of the listeners with regards to creativity and innovation. So please participate. If you don't know how to get to the community site, just go to killerinnovations.com and click on the KI community button in the upper right hand corner. Today's show, segment 1, cost benefit considerations for innovation. One of the big questions I always get around innovation is how do you decide, what are some of the criteria that you can use to decide if the users are really going to make the investment in adopting a new kind of innovation? Well, one of the tools that I used is cost benefit analysis. Now, typically a cost benefit analysis is focused primarily on financial return. I spend $1 and I get $3 back. In this case, what I'm talking about is using it to assess the innovation quality. What is the quality of the innovation that you're bringing to market? So for instance, if the cost to the customer outweighs the benefit, then you would classify it as really being a poor innovation. So for instance, what would constitute a cost? Well, let's say you're in a museum and you've designed a new exhibit, but that exhibit is in a hard place to find in the far corner of the museum. So the searching and the walking of the customer to find that exhibit, that is a cost. If the quality of the exhibit is not equal to or better than, quote, the user's cost of time and effort to walk to that exhibit, then that would be a low quality innovation. On the flip side, though, if the benefit is greater than the cost, then that would constitute a good innovation, and therefore the users or your customers would be inclined to adopt whatever the new idea is. So what are some other examples of kind of what this cost benefit and how does it get applied to innovation? Well, one would be, for instance, how many steps does it take to complete a task? This is the proverbial, how many steps does it take to save a file in Word? How many steps does it take to play a song in iTunes? Now, how many steps does it take? If the user is not going to receive what they constitute as a benefit equal to the complexity of completing the tasks, then they're not going to see that as a benefit or a positive benefit. Another example is the old-time example of setting the time and date on your video recorder. How many people, I remember growing up, in the 70s and 80s with the VCR in my parents' house, constantly flashing 12, because the benefit of having that set to the exact time versus the cost of looking through the manual and going through a series of complex steps to get the date and time set just did not correlate, and so therefore the feature function was of low value. Now, the flip side, though, on cost-benefit analysis is we try to set universal rules. Well, one of the most common universal rules, particularly in the web space today, is download time. You want to be able to have a page come up and you set the universal rule that says it should be no more than 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 1 second, whatever the criteria is you want to set. But in reality, the user is going to perceive that time in relation to the value of what's being displayed. So if the value of that display is 0, meaning it's a pop-up ad that the customer actually doesn't want, a banner advertisement, or the content is of poor quality, you could have that page appear instantaneously. You would still be on a negative cost benefit because the user does not perceive any benefit from that capability. The flip side is a page that's incredibly valuable, listing of all the current value of all my stock holdings, the current balance of my checking account. I'm willing to go 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds for that download to come because that is of high value. So the problem with cost-benefit analysis is you cannot establish universal rules, and this is one of the common problems when trying to understand What benefit are you giving to the customer, and what value do they associate to it? The other challenge here is beyond trying to set these universal rules, but also to try to identify what is cost and what is a benefit. And the point here is that you have to look at, or you have to get validation of what is a cost from the actual community of users of this product or service that you're innovating, and what is they perceive as benefit. So for instance, a new feature to an existing, let's say, piece of software. Now the designers are getting very, very excited about this new feature to an existing software. But in many cases, the users never even see that feature. It's some obscure piece down in the software. And in fact, it has an incremental cost because it adds additional complexity to the software. And in fact, additional software is not always a good thing, meaning the software may not be as stable. So here's a case where they've identified some kind of feature, and therefore they viewed that the designers thought of it as a benefit. The users attributed no value to it, and in fact, it increased the cost. And so therefore, it actually was on the wrong side of the cost-benefit analysis. Now, the key here is to avoid a cost-benefit analysis. The key here is to observe people using the innovation or something like the innovation that you're developing. It doesn't have to be your product. It could be a competitor's product, but you want to observe the people. So this gets back to my whole concept of ethnography. And if you haven't listened to that podcast, I would encourage you to go back and do so. The other is to do usability testing. Use the product or use the service. Usability could be your IVR for your customer care group. Usability could be doing maintenance on a machine that you've sold a customer. But to avoid the misunderstanding and the misinterpretation of what is cost and what is benefit, do this by observation. And the key here is consider cost-benefit analysis against all the innovations. This should be part of your criteria before you let an innovation go out and be commercialized. And the key here also is don't make a feature function decision based solely on cost. So in many cases, it's the cost of how much does it cost for me to develop it, or the cost of the user to take advantage of it. See if you can't quantify the benefit side of it also. Benefits are hard to quantify, but can give you key insight in how the user perceives whatever the additional capability is. And again, verify the cost benefit with the target population by observation. Segment 2, I'm going to take a little bit of a variance from what we normally do in the podcast. And that is, I'm going to talk about kind of what some observations that I've picked up through conversations with listeners and emails, a lot with students trying to understand, they want to go into a creative field. How do they do that? What program should they consider? There was one podcast some time ago where I talked about the Masters of Fine Arts becoming really the new MBA for users. But I guess what I want to do is I want to share with you maybe at least, my observations. And what I'm going to share with you here is a little story that Bob Davis shared with me. And for those of you who've heard also the previous podcast on mentoring, know that Bob Davis was my mentor right out of college. And he told this story of a farmer driving out through his field. He grows pumpkins, and the pumpkins had just started to grow, and he found the old glass milk jug, and he actually poked the little early stage of the pumpkin into the milk jug and left it out in the field. And now the pumpkins all grow, and he's going about harvesting this pumpkin at the end of the year. He gets out there and he finds the pumpkin still in the milk jug, but it's actually conformed itself to the shape of the milk jug. So he cuts it off, takes it back up to the house, and sets it on his front porch. His son, who is a school teacher, comes in and sees this pumpkin to the shape of the milk jug. And it gives them kind of this inspiration about what the challenges are with educating in the high school world today. And I would argue that this isn't constrained to just the high school world. But the reality is that, we are like those pumpkins. We tend to poke ourselves into milk jugs, and the milk jugs could be our perceived position in life, our perceived careers, jobs, family lives, whatever. But it's really the decisions that we make in our mindset that limits us to the shape of our own milk jugs. And the reality is those milk jugs then confine us. We get perceptions on what we're good at, what we're not good at, what we're capable of doing, what lot in life that we're going to have. We have to realize that there are things that we can't do well or at all. I mean, my wife would have very strong opinions on what things that I'm good at and what things I'm not good at. But there are other people who can do those things very well. Like, I don't fix the car, but I hire a very good mechanic to take care of my vehicles. But we also have to recognize that each of us are uniquely fitted to succeed in a certain important department of human society. I continue to get emails from people who say, well, I'm in this kind of low tech area and it's really kind of mundane, but I really like your podcast. What I'm trying to do here is challenge you to think beyond where you are today, but to also recognize that every one of us have a position in society that is critically important. And the role of creativity and the role of innovation is important in all of these areas. It's really all of our jobs to discover what those fields are. Where do we fit? What are we good at? And what is it we can bring to society? And really, self-improvement is really around finding what you're best at and then learn, practice, and apply the skills to be the best that you can be. Now, creativity is in everyone. Now, you've heard me say this before, and I'm going to say it again. You're going to get tired of me hearing about it. But it's my firm belief that creativity is in every one of us. Everyone can learn it, practice, and apply it, both to your personal life and to your professional life. Creativity is the foundation to everything you do, whether you're an at-home parent raising your children, your career, donating your time to nonprofits, or whether you're in academic research. Creativity is foundational to everything we do. And it's really the objective, or what I'm trying to do with these podcasts is to help every one of the listeners, every one of you, to build and improve those skill sets and apply it to whatever is your objectives, whether that's personal. How do you be more creative on, raising your children or taking care of your house or starting a new company or planning the next family reunion or the next birthday party, or if you're in a profession, whether that's manufacturing, oil and gas, automotive, financial, high tech. But how do you apply creativity? And the key here, though, is that I think through applying everybody's creative skills, that we all can decide that there will be no limits placed on your future possibilities. Whether your job is today, what your job is tomorrow, you can apply the creativity and creative thinking process to understand what it is you could do with your career. So again, remember, above all, you can decide that there'll be no limits placed on your future possibilities. Segment 3, killer question. The killer question this week is around what I call random association. Now, the problem we have typically when we start thinking about killer questions or trying to creatively think about how do I apply what I'm working on to a specific area is we get caught into kind of this, natural fit based on experience. You're solving a problem around a specific new product idea or a new kind of a service, and you tend to apply, or your brain tends to get locked into things that you've done in the past that have worked or has not worked. We also tend to get hung up on the logic, point A plus B equals C. So what we do, this killer question that I'm proposing for this week is really around how do I take random thoughts that forces me to think about the item at hand completely differently. So this week's killer question is, and again, the focus is on random association. So pick 3 random items and construct the question of what do item 1, item 2, and item 3 have in common. So whatever 3 items you've chosen, what do item 1, item 2, and item 3 have in common? And what you're searching for is really those hidden links, things that you normally wouldn't think about. They're going to force you to come up with totally new ideas. The flip side is you can also say, what do item 1, item 2, item 3 not have in common? So let me give you an example. What do rollerblades, Haagen-Dazs ice cream, and the Batman movie have in common? So again, what do rollerblades, Haagen-Dazs ice cream, and the Batman movie have in common? Well, they're children items. They tend to be higher end, so Haagen-Dazs ice cream and rollerblades are kind of a step up from the old roller skates that we used to have. Well, the common linkage here is it's kind of the boomers reliving their childhood. So Batman, I used to read the Batman comics. Now there's a movie. Haagen-Dazs ice cream, I used to get the 10-cent ice cream. Now you go spend, some serious money for the high-end Haagen-Dazs. And rollerblading tends to be, a lot of adults are into rollerblading. So in this case, you're looking really at kind of high-end children activities that are appropriate for adults, or things that we've done as children that we are now reliving as adults. So what are some possible ideas when I apply this question? Well, one would be, for instance, gourmet jelly beans. So, not just regular jelly beans, but really high end. The other is kind of what we call adult fantasy camps. We used to go to summer camp, but now you can actually go and do these fantasy camps. So you want to be a chef, but you're not a chef by day. You can go and spend a week being a chef. You as an adult can go down to Alabama and actually go through space camp in the adult camp side of it. So again, think of it as children activities that you're now reliving as an adult. So again, this week's killer question is pick 3 items, 2 or 3 items in fact, and form the question of what do item 1, item 2, and item 3 have in common. So in this week, we're also going to add a segment 4. We actually have got in 1 homework assignment from 1 listener. So listen up. This is a audio feedback coming in from 1 listener, and it's actually a little bit about what he's doing in Peru, but he also forms a question. So listen to this, and then I'm going to come back and I'll give you my thoughts based on the question that he asks in his audio comment.
Hi Phil, my name's Adam Johnston and I innovate in video game and process metallurgy areas through my companies that I've built here in Peru. I enjoy your podcast. I've always been very good at getting people to buy into my innovative ideas as I give a mean sales pitch and wind people into hysteria about the great concepts that seem to make sense. The problem is that my ideas sometimes only make sense to a layman on paper. Sometimes it's a timing issue where I build concepts that are still 2 or 3 years away from mainstream implementation, things that just aren't feasible yet. Once they get going in engineering or production, they've occasionally led to millions of dollars in losses. And it's been a bit difficult for me to shine the light back on my other ideas that made much more than was lost. I guess that this comes back to everyone jumping on the bandwagon with good ideas, everybody accepting ownership of good ideas, but then jumping on the escape pod as things go wrong and pointing the finger afterwards. How do you suggest that we cushion the impact when our crazy innovations don't work out? I use the expression, you have to break some eggs to make an omelette, but the vast majority focus on small losses rather than larger gains. Thanks for the podcast.
So basically, the question that's being raised is limiting the downside for bad ideas. So you have really good ideas that may be very far-reaching, you're working on current ideas, and maybe they don't pan out. And as soon as you get kind of a reputation of having a couple of failures, you're finding it extremely hard to get the management teams to listen to your really good ideas and to back them based on history. Well, there's really not an easy way to limit the downside. Guess what? You're going to have failures. If anybody out there is coming up with really breakthrough ideas and is batting 1,000%, let me know. I'd be willing to invest money in you because there's nobody out there doing it. Everybody's going to have failures. So the key here is, what I find is when you're in an organization where the failures are counting against you, there's typically two issues. One is management. Management is saying they want to support breakthrough ideas. They want you to take risks, but when the risks don't work out, they're looking for somebody to blame. The key here is either to re-educate management on and make sure you're doing good expectation management so there's no surprises, but also two, help management either to restructure themselves or go work for somebody else that actually looks to reward failures. There are organizations out there that actually reward failures because failures means you are taking a risk and eventually you are going to hit on something that is going to have a huge impact. Now, the second thing that you can do in a more technical perspective, because your ability to influence management really is dictated by where you are within the organization. So, how do you limit the downside risk and gain better support for your ideas within your peers or other people that are on the team? Well, the key here is that in many cases when the project fails and people are pointing fingers, it's really by the fact that these people on the team did not feel ownership of the idea. Now, really two steps here, very simple, but I found them to be incredibly helpful, is build social capital with peers, subordinates, people who are reporting to you potentially on a project, and your management. This requires a lot of time and it requires a lot of communication. This requires using your storytelling capabilities, your ability to convey the idea, the ability to convey the total effort that's going to be required. But this is not a one-way street where you're just talking. This is also listening, soliciting feedback, soliciting both positive and negative feedback, and really it's going to be dictated by how you respond. Take all of that feedback as input and modify it. Include other people's ideas. Give other people credit for contributing to the overall project. Once you've done that, then they will claim, you'll start seeing people really investing their time and energy into the program or the project, and they start to feel ownership. You've built up that social capital with those participants. And once you've built up that social capital, then it's going to be much harder for them to get into the blame game should a project go bad. So again, two things on limiting the downside. One, make sure management has proper expectation management and help management understand that it's to their benefit to actually reward failures, not punish. Now, depending on your ability to influence management, the item or the area that you can focus in on immediately on any project that you're working on is building ownership, getting the other participants to feel like they have ownership in the program, ownership in the idea. Credit is not that important. When I was younger, I was busy on coming up with very creative, innovative ideas, and I was constantly looking for the spotlight and looking for the credit. I guess it comes with age. You realize that credit is less important, than getting the idea out into the market. So share the credit, share the limelight, build that social capital, take in contributions, highlight contributions that you're applying and who they came from so those people recognize that they are contributing. Once you've built up that feeling of ownership, then it's going to be much harder for them to play the blame game with you. With that, thanks for listening. Keep the audio feedback coming. Audio feedback is the easiest for me to include in the podcast. So just like in segment 4, I'm going to include a segment 4 whenever I have audio feedback from a listener. So if you want to send me audio feedback, you can email it to me, or you can call the feedback line at 703-636-4460. And again, you can email me at podcast@killerinnovations.com. Please remember to vote. Visit Podcast Alley. Your vote is the easiest way for you to tell your favorite podcast that you appreciate all the effort that goes into research and producing the podcast. Tell others about the podcast. Think of it as really as your way to pay it forward by helping others to unlock their ability to create the next killer innovation. You can subscribe to this podcast at killerinnovations.com, visiting iTunes, visiting Yahoo, or by visiting many of the podcast directories. So, get subscribed, get others to subscribe, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.